On March 8, 2014, a massive Boeing 777 took off from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, climbed into the night sky, and then vanished without a trace. No Mayday call, no distress signal. Nothing. Today, we break down the mystery of Flight MH370, the most unbelievable disappearance in modern aviation history. What really happened to the 239 people on board? And why, after more than a decade, do we still have no definitive answers? Let's rewind to that night. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 was a routine red-eye, scheduled to fly from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. On board were 227 passengers and 12 crew members from more than a dozen different countries. The flight took off just after midnight, and for the first 40 minutes, everything was completely normal. The aircraft reached its cruising altitude. The crew performed their standard check-ins, and everything appeared to be going exactly as planned. Then, at 1:19 a.m. local time, something changed. As the plane was about to pass from Malaysian to Vietnamese airspace, the aircraft's transponder, the device that communicates its identity and altitude to air traffic control, was switched off. Just a couple of minutes later, another key communication system, which sends automatic updates on the plane's health, also went silent. From that moment on, MH370 was a ghost on civilian radar screens. It had simply disappeared. But that's not the strange part. The strange part is what happened after. The last thing anyone on the ground heard from the cockpit was a calm, almost casual voice saying, "Good night, Malaysian 370. Those were the final words from Flight MH370. This transmission occurred just moments before the transponder was disabled. Instead of continuing on its path to Beijing, the aircraft made a sharp, deliberate turn to the southwest, flying back across the Malaysian peninsula. It was a deviation that made no sense. While civilian radar lost the plane, military radar picked it up. It tracked the unidentified aircraft, which we now know was MH370. It flew over the Strait of Malacca and then headed northwest over the Andaman Sea. Incredibly, the plane continued to fly for nearly 7 more hours. It was completely silent, a ghost ship flying through the darkness, far from any commercial flight path. Then, at the edge of military radar range, over the vast expanse of the southern Indian Ocean, it vanished for good. The plane had enough fuel for about 7.5 hours of flight. The final radar contact aligns almost perfectly with that fuel limit. So, what could have happened? The simplest explanation, and one of the first theories, was a catastrophic technical failure. Perhaps a fire broke out, or there was a sudden, explosive decompression that incapacitated everyone on board. In this scenario, the crew and passengers would have become unconscious from hypoxia, a lack of oxygen. The plane, flying on autopilot, would have continued its journey as a ghost flight until it finally ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. But there's a huge problem with this idea. A simple mechanical failure doesn't explain why multiple communication systems were shut down sequentially. The transponder and ACA's system being disabled minutes apart strongly suggests intentional action. These systems don't just fail at the same time. Turning them off typically requires someone in the cockpit to manually flip switches. This key detail makes the simple accent theory very difficult to believe. This leads us to the second, more unsettling theory. Intentional action by the pilot. The man in command of MH370 was Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a highly experienced and respected pilot with over 18,000 flight hours. He was known as a friendly family man and a dedicated professional. However, during the investigation, authorities discovered something that raised serious questions. On a sophisticated flight simulator found in his home, they found deleted data points that, when recovered, showed a flight path eerily similar to the one MH370 is believed to have taken a route deep into the remote southern Indian Ocean. Could the captain have deliberately crashed the plane? It's a theory that some investigators have leaned towards, but it's crucial to state that there is absolutely no proof of this. His family, friends, and co-workers have always maintained his innocence, describing him as a stable, kind person with no signs of distress. Furthermore, investigators never found a motive. There was no suicide note, no financial trouble, no political grievance, no sign of mental health struggles. Without a motive, The pilot theory remains just that, a dark, unproven speculation. So, if it wasn't an accident and wasn't the pilot, what about the third major theory? A hijacking. This could have been carried out by a passenger, a hidden stowaway, or even an external force through a sub. The idea is that someone seized control of the aircraft, disabled communications to avoid detection, and then diverted the plane for some unknown purpose. But this theory is also full of holes. In virtually every hijacking in history, the perpetrators make their presence known. They issue demands, they claim responsibility, they have a political or financial goal. With MH370, there was nothing. Complete silence. No group ever came forward. No ransom was ever requested. If the goal was to use the plane as a weapon, why fly it to one of the most remote and desolate parts of the planet? And if the goal was to steal the plane, what was the endgame? The hijacking theory creates more questions than it answers. For years, the search for MH370 was the largest and most expensive in aviation history. Search teams from multiple countries scoured a massive area of the southern Indian Ocean, using sonar, submarines, and aircraft. But they found nothing. The deep, treacherous underwater terrain made the search incredibly difficult. The primary search was eventually called off in 2017, leaving families and investigators with no closure. But then, something started to happen. Debris from the plane began to wash ashore. In July 2015, a piece of a wing called a flaperon was found on Reunion Island, thousands of miles from the search area. Over the following months and years, more than 20 pieces of debris were found on the coastlines of Mozambique, Tanzania, Madagascar, and South Africa. These pieces, confirmed to be from MH370, were carried by ocean currents. The discovery of this debris proved two things. First, the plane did indeed crash. Second, it almost certainly went down somewhere in the vast southern Indian Ocean, just as the satellite data had suggested. The debris provided physical evidence, but it couldn't tell us why the plane crashed or where the main wreckage ended. The black boxes are located. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder hold the key to understanding what happened in those final hours, but they remain lost in the depths of the ocean. And that is why, after all this time, MH370 remains one of the greatest and most heartbreaking mysteries of our time. We have fragments of the truth satellite pings, military radar tracks, and washed-up debris. But the central questions remain unanswered. Was it a mechanical failure, a deliberate act by the pilot, or a hijacking by an unknown party? No confirmed cause, no exact location, and still no definitive answers for the 239 families who lost their loved ones. The story of MH370 is a chilling reminder that even in our hyper-connected world, something as large as a Boeing 777 can simply vanish. If you are fascinated by real, unexplained stories and want to explore more of the world's greatest mysteries, make sure to follow our channel. We release new investigations every week. Thanks for watching.